And we can see that the Pratt & Whitney radial engine there is modeled to perfection, more or less. Let's just go ahead and pull the throttles right back. And oh boy, you can hear that the alarms are going off. So yes, everything is about to go down. So hello everyone and welcome back to the channel, and welcome to those new subscribers as well. Glad to have you aboard. Now in today's video I thought I would cover the excellent Boeing 247D by the third-party add-on publisher Wing 42. This is for Microsoft Flight Simulator, and that is what we are in today and what we'll be playing. And you can see here that this aircraft is very nicely done so far, just from looking at it from the outside. And we've got a real treat ahead of us today. I hope you got a little bit of time. If you know me, I do like to pay attention to details, and that's what we'll be going for here today as well. So this video is going to serve as a bit of a first look, and we're going to go for a little flight as well. First, we're going to obviously jump inside and have a look at all the intricacies of this aircraft, and then we'll load it up with some baggage and we'll fly to a different airport. But it's only going to be a short hop flight, but a lot of the time is going to be spent just looking over all the systems and how they work and all that kind of stuff. So this is the Boeing 247D, not the 747. This is the 247. So this is basically the first airliner that was ever made, more or less, and particularly by Boeing Aircraft Corporation back in 1933 or thereabouts, I believe it is. And so yes, this is a very old school aircraft. They don't make them like this anymore, and you won't see an aircraft like this in your daily travels, I must say. But part of the charm of flying this aircraft is just trying to get to know all the old school systems, the way it uses fuses instead of circuit breakers and all that kind of stuff. And we'll have a look at that, all the electrical side of things as well, when we hop in just a second. But there's so much to this aircraft indeed, in this simulation, and they've covered off so much. You can just see there we've got those little wheel chocks, those yellow wheel chocks supported against the tires there. You can actually turn those, you can add those, you can remove those. Obviously you'd want to do that when you want to take off, but yeah, we'll go through all of that and more. I've just hopped inside here and we're just having a look at the cockpit. You can see the control stands moving there realistically. Got the throttle levers and whatnot on the center stand. All of that we'll go through in just a second. Yeah, you can see here we've got the window, obviously, that you can open and close. Now the sound scheme on this is pretty cool as well. When you open the window, you'll hear a change in the audio of the engines, as you'd expect. Just doing a bit of a control surface check here. You've got some pretty good visibility over the wing there as a pilot. Okay, and so yeah, let's go through some of these features. So we've got I'll just start on the left hand side here. Just turned on my flashlight on my head, so I'm lighting up the cockpit here. We've got on the left hand side here a bit of outside temperature, landing gear indications, temperature indications for the engine, so you can flip between all the different types of indication there. You got your fuel gauges down there on the bottom left, and then you got your sacred 6 more or less in the middle here, except you do have a power indicator, which is the manifold pressure in the middle there with that little red band and white band. You can flip between your manifold pressure settings as well by flipping that little lever, so you can show left engine, right engine. Let's see, coming across to the right hand side here, we've got our oil temperatures and oil pressure gauges. We've got our fuel pressure gauges right at the top there. You'll be paying attention to these when you prime the aircraft to start the engines. Here's the oil gauges, so there's 4 gauges there. Very important, oil pressure is simulated. You've got your engine tachometers there as well, the RPM gauges, and you've got the fire extinguisher panel here as well. So you can select left engine or right engine, and then basically pull that handle there, and then that will extinguish whatever engine you've got on fire. And the engines can catch fire if you don't know what you're doing with this thing as well. So yes. You've got here as well, you have engine feathering buttons, which you can feather the props if you need to. And then you've got your instrument light cluster, or your instrument switch cluster. On the far right there, I'm just showing the ammeter, so that will show if there's a discharge or a charge on your battery. And it's worth noting that the generator is mounted on engine 1. So when engine 1 is running, then that will charge your battery. But if it's not running or running too slowly, then you'll have a discharge on the electrical system. What we've got here as well is the engine distributor dial and fuel tank selector. We've got our magneto gauges switches there, and we've got our fuse box as well, as you can see here. And these fuses are all simulated as well. So this is the radio fuse box for the radios, and you can connect and disconnect those to make the radios work or not work. And you've got your main fuse box here down the bottom right hand corner, and you've also got a little box here when you're on the ground that shows you spare fuses if you need spare fuses as well. So all the fuses are simulated as well. You can blow fuses, you can replace them and all that kind of stuff. Down here on the center stack, on the center pedestal, we've got our propeller levers, we've got mixtures, and we've got the throttle levers as well. And you've got these cool little friction locks, and you'll see this when we're running, when the plane is flying and the engine's running, that these levers will vibrate, so you can actually lock them in place. We've got the oil shutter levers here as well, which are very important to control cooling of the engines. And then you've got your carburetor heat as well. Okay, some of the other things here that you do also have, just to point out, on the left hand side here we've got the priming controls basically. So what you've got here is you've got the primer engine selector, you've got the plunger, and you've got the master valve. Okay, now everything here is persistent, so a lot of these valves and switches are set exactly how I left them in the last flight. I've tried to reset everything back to usual, but there's probably still some switches or levers that were left on. Now just having a look through the little peephole there, you've got the passenger cabin, which is fully modeled. I've just opened the door there, you can see the seats and everything. You can even interact with some of the you've got the reading light, you've got the ashtrays which you can even open and close, and they've really gone all out, as you can see, in modeling this level of detail. You don't really see this much detail very often in these add-on third-party planes. And the really cool thing with this aircraft is it's actually quite cheap on the flight simulator marketplace, only about say $20-30 basically. So okay, so just bringing up the clipboard here. Now this clipboard is the main part of how you can actually control what happens to the airplane from a ground services point of view. And there's other information in here as well. Basically there's things like performance information, weight and balance, maintenance, oil system, you've got the engine start procedure, additional info, radio equipment, all this kind of stuff is basically in here. So as we go through, you can see there it's got performance specs, climb, takeoff, cruise power settings, fuel consumption, single engine procedure. This thing actually runs quite well on the single engine. And you've got there, it talks about the generator and other general information there. You can see it says the generator requires engine 1 to run. And things like the gyro and other bits and pieces, the turn and bank indicator required the left and right engine, depending on what we're talking about there. But it's all here in the manual. You've got some emergency power settings there as well. The next page here, just looking at the payload, weight and balance. Okay, so basically you can load the plane up, you can add more fuel. For example, I can add some fuel to the tanks, I can add some cargo, so I can add passengers as well by clicking those seat icons, and then I can add cargo, for example, by clicking the plus icons on the rear section there. You do have to click on make it so, that big green button, in order for these changes to take effect. You can see the oil tanks for each engine as well. I've run this plane a little bit, they're a little bit down on oil. And you've also got the ground crew list here, which you can actually click, and that will actually take effect immediately, any settings that you change in that little shaded box there. But yeah, basically what happens is if you make any changes here in the main section of the diagram, you do have to click on make it so. But yeah, any changes you make under ground crew, you don't have to click on make it so. You can just click those check boxes at will. And so you make your changes here, as I described, hit make it so, and then what you'll see on the right hand side there is these little job cards. Okay, so you've got a ground crew consisting of 2 agents and 1 mechanic. And the ramp agents will load the baggage, and the mechanic will do things like fill the oil and the fuel. You can see he's doing the fuel there. And we can see the ramp agents loading up some luggage into the back of the aircraft. So in this video, what I'm doing is basically going to put some luggage in the plane, and we'll fly it over a little short hop, head south, and then we'll actually drop off this luggage at a different airport. We'll go across to Willapa Harbour Airport. That's 2S9 anyway. You can see there that the baggage is gradually being added into the plane. You've got the passenger door on the other side, which hasn't been opened because we haven't told them to. but we've only done the baggage on the rear section at the moment. So if we just hop back inside, actually what you'll see there, the trolley's disappeared, so they've done their job with the baggage. What you can do is you can add passengers, and you can see there, if I click on those seats, I won't do that here, but you can click on the passengers and then you can add them to the plane as well if you want to. What I might do is I might just show you a little bit more about this. So basically in this ground crew section as well, you can go ahead and we're just going to go ahead and turn on some of the baggage, and we'll go ahead and turn on some of the other bits and pieces as well. And you can see there we've added the passenger stairs. So they've gone ahead and they've opened the door, the passenger door, they've opened the front hatch for the cargo, and you can see there that's all modeled as well. So that's really, really cool. And we'll just go ahead and just add the baggage cart and just watch as they bring all these things out to the plane. So yeah, you can really simulate some really cool loading scenarios here by bringing all these trolleys out, and then you can load things into the plane. It's mostly cosmetic, but anything you do add to the plane will add weight. So you can see there I've got 250 kilos in the back. They say that if you add weight to the back, you've got to add some weight to the front as well. I think it's a 1-to-2 ratio, so 2 kilos in the back, you should have 1 kilo in the front, I think. So I've just gone ahead and added some mail there, and they're just going to add some mail to the plane. So if we hop on outside again, we should see that there's some mail packages there in the plane. So that's really cool. They've just added those up. So that's, that's basically the ground services page, the payload, weight and balance. Just remember, anything you add to the plane, you do add weight. So I'm just going to go ahead and untick a lot of these. Or we'll just leave the wheel chocks on for the moment, but we'll get them to close the passenger door, which they've done, and just remove those stairs, which they've now done as well. Okay, so next page on the clipboard there, we've got the engine startup. Now there's two main ways to start the engines. You've got the assisted start, where the mechanic will spin the flywheel himself and then engage the starter. You just give him the directions. Or you've got the manual start down here, which means you've got to click on get the ladder, attach the starter crank, and you've got to get out there and actually turn that crank yourself as well. So that's pretty cool. What I might do is I might do the manual start on the left, and then we'll do the automated or assisted start on the right engine. So let's go ahead and get into the startup procedure. So what we'll do is we'll just adjust the primer there for the left-hand engine, which is that position right there. And we'll make sure the primer master valve is on, which is that position there. And then what we need to do is, as well, we'll go ahead and just check our fuel levels by operating these plungers. And we can see that we've got about half a tank on the left-hand tank. And the right main is a little bit higher, I guess. Yeah, we've more or less got about half of fuel load at the moment on the plane, which is more than enough fuel to get us where we need to go. And so what we'll do is we'll just go ahead and turn on the master ignition switch. So pull is off, so like that. You want to push it in to turn it on. Go ahead and turn on the magnetos, so they want to be set to both. And then we'll come across and turn on our engine distributor dial. So this distributes the fuel to either the left or right engine or both. So we need to operate the wobble pump as well, which will give us fuel pressure when we're starting. So you can leave it in the left only position and then switch it to both once the left engine starts, and that way you feed both engines from that point onwards. I'll leave it in left only for now. And then the tank selector, which we'll go ahead and select the left-hand tank to draw fuel from. Okay, so what we'll do now is we'll go ahead and just crack the throttle a little bit, about an inch or so. Go ahead and make sure the mixtures and propeller levers are fully forward. So mixtures full rich, propellers full RPM, full fine in the old money. Oil shutters are closed for the moment, but we'll have to adjust those as the engines start running to make sure we don't overheat. Okay. Alright, so what we need to do here is, because we're going to do a manual start on the left hand side, I'm just going to click on get the ladder. So he's going to bring the ladder, good old Jack, our aircraft mechanic. And there we go, he's just added the ladder to the left engine. And then we'll go ahead and ask him to attach the starter crank. Now the starter crank, there's only one starter crank on the plane. And if we go ahead and just open the front cargo door, we'll just get one of the agents to open that door for us. You'll see there's an actual starter crank handle right there, okay? And so there's only one crank with the plane, but actually there is a way to get 2 cranks on the plane as well. That's a bit of a cheat, but anyway. We'll go ahead and just click on attach starter handle, and then he should go and attach that handle shortly. There you go. There's the nice handle just out there in the breeze there. Okay, obviously you don't want to keep this on the plane all the time, just for starting purposes. Okay, so now we've got the ladder there, the crank handles on, but we do need to prime some fuel into the engine first before it will catch. So we use the fuel wobble pump, and we want about 5 on the fuel pressure indication there, which is like halfway up the gauge. So if I just operate that wobble pump, you can see there that gauge needle, hopefully you can see that on the left hand side. The needle has risen to about halfway there. So what happens is when you operate the wobble pump, you get some fuel pressure, then you use that fuel pressure to prime. So we'll just prime the engine. We'll give it 4 strokes because the first stroke there was a bit short, I think. There we go. Okay, fuel pressure will start to drop immediately, and then you just got to operate that wobble pump once again. Just keep that pressure up in the fuel lines while you're starting. So then we'll hop on outside with a bit of fuel pressure already in the lines. We're on our ladder here, and we'll go ahead and start cranking this lever over. Okay, so let me just explain what's going on here. Basically, we're spinning a very fast or very large heavy flywheel in the engine right now. We're spinning it around really, really fast. Once we get it to a certain speed, we'll pull a little switch, and that will engage that fast spinning flywheel. It will engage it against the engine, okay? And that will spin the engine over. And then if everything's right, we've got our ignition on, our fuel is pressured up and primed properly, then the engine will start, okay? So we're just spinning the crank over real fast. Now I'm just going to hop back inside real quick, just keep the pressure up using that fuel wobble pump, bring the pressure back up, hop back outside and pull the switch. Oh, and there we go, the engine's running. Okay, so quickly hop back inside and just watch the oil pressure there. It's always the first thing to watch in these old engines, or any engine really. When it starts up, you want to make sure you got that oil pressure. Oil pressure's not there, then you shut the engine down. Okay, so now with this, the oil viscosity is all modeled as well. So when the oil is cold, you'll get a very high oil pressure reading. If you let the oil get too hot, it will actually reduce your oil pressure, and it can get to a point where your oil pressure is too low. Okay, so you've got to watch your oil temps. You don't want your oil temps to get higher than about 100 on the gauge there, on the oil temp gauge. And that should be 100 degrees Celsius, but it says Fahrenheit there for some reason. So there you go there. You don't want it to get past 100, because then your oil pressure will come down, okay, below 60, which you don't want. Just having a look at the ammeter there, you can see there's a bit of a discharge on the battery there. That's because the engine's running too slow. If we bring the RPM up a little bit, want it up around 1200 RPM also, you'll note there that our ammeter is now showing into the charge zone. Okay, so the engine's, well, one engine is running at the moment, and our oil temperature, oil pressures are within range. So you don't want the oil temps higher than 100, and you don't want the oil pressure higher than about 120. You can see our fuel pressure, is wobbling away there nicely. Okay, so we're basically ready to unattach the start handle on the left engine. And what we'll do as well is just change, what I just want to quickly show before I go any further is just the parking brake lever as well. Just want to make sure that's turned on. Even though we've got the chocks on, as you can see there outside the aeroplane, it's just a good idea to have the parking brake enabled or on, basically, so that when they take the chocks away, the plane doesn't start to roll away unexpectedly. Okay, so just a quick little tip there. Okay, so let's go ahead and start engine number 2 without further ado. So the way to do this is basically remove the starting handle from the left engine and remove the ladder as well. So just go ahead and do that. There we go. So that ladder should disappear in just a sec. Boom. Okay. And then we'll go ahead and move the ladder to the right hand side and attach the starter crank to the right hand side engine. You can see there it says installing the ladder, and then it's queued up the starter crank. So he can only do one thing at a time, obviously, so he's just working his way through there now. Okay, he's done. So he's put the ladder out there, he's got the starter crank on that side. So I'm going to stay inside this time, and I'm just going to use the assisted startup procedure. But obviously what you want to do is change the distributor dial to both this time, so that when you use the wobble pump, you're pumping into the right hand engine as well. Okay, so you can see there the right hand fuel pressure gauge. So we've got it into both. If we were to turn it into left, if I was to then operate the wobble pump as I'm doing there, you'll see how it's not doing the right hand engine. Okay, so you got to make sure that you change this dial into both. Okay, when you go to start the right hand engine, or you can just set it to both to begin with and be done with it. Anyway, okay, so got the distributor dial on both, just operating the wobble pump there frantically with the mouse. Got some fuel pressure there on the right hand side, and gonna go ahead and change the primer to the right hand side, and then just give it 3 or 4 strokes as well. And then what do we do next? You guessed it, gonna come down and just make sure that we give our wobble pump a little bit more pressure, because the pressure has dropped already. Just want to keep that pressure up on the fuel pressure gauge during the start procedure. Okay, so we'll go ahead and click wind up flywheel. He's going to go ahead and start winding the flywheel. It's going to go very slowly, so what you can do is basically when the mesh flywheel button appears in green like it just has there, you can go ahead and just hit the button to mesh the engine. But I like to give it a little bit more time, because yeah, I find that if you don't wait long enough, that flywheel doesn't have enough momentum. So just going to use that wobble pump in the meantime a little bit more. You can see there, it's only still around 20% that he's winding the crank. And whoops, he stopped. No, there he goes. That crank handle animation on the right hand side is a little bit hit and miss, but he's winding that crank constantly as far as I can tell. So 38% now. Get him to wind it up real good. And I'm just going to come down and give the wobble pump a little bit more of a wobble. As you can see, you really can't go anywhere faster in this aeroplane if you want to get it started from cold. It does take, there's quite a bit of procedure here involved. So yeah, this is an old plane. Nothing happens fast, unfortunately. Okay, so he's winding away. We've got enough fuel. Let's go ahead and tell him to mesh. Oh, I just saw the propeller spin around, and it looks like, yep, looks like the engine's running. Let's quickly glance at the oil pressure. Yep, oil pressure is going up. So oil pressure is nice and high there, because we've got cold oil on the right-hand side. Okay, we've got our fuel pressures just bouncing along nicely. Okay, so that's basically it for the engine startup. So go to the next page. One thing I forgot to show actually just yet is the left and right engine cowlings. You can remove them, and you can open the battery compartment, stuff like that. You can get the oil pan, and you can change the oil and all that kind of stuff. You got here the simulation settings as well. This is all on the maintenance page of the Clipboard. So I've turned on malfunctions, realistic engine start, electrical failures. I love all that stuff. I'm keeping that on. Okay, this plane does infuriate some people with just how difficult it can be to start, but I think I've managed to get it down pat somehow. Now this is the oil system page on the Clipboard. Now oil viscosities are fully modeled, so you can run the oil that's too thin or too thick based on the weather, so you've got to be careful there. I'm running SAE 30 grade oil, and that covers us from 20 to 95 degrees ambient Fahrenheit temperature range. So we're about 60 at the moment, so SAE 30 is just fine for me. SAE 50 is a little bit too thick, I found. And oil pressure is, yeah, not great. You can see there it says here above 1200 RPM, you want 70 to 100 psi on the oil pressure. 60 psi is permissible, but if it falls below 60, that's when you know that there could be trouble. Okay, so just bear that in mind. 60 psi on the oil pressure or more, and I try not to go above 100. Okay, if it gets to 120 plus, then that's a cause of concern as well. That just normally means your oil's too cold. Okay, and final page, more or less, on the Clipboard is the radio equipment, which I'm not going to go through in this video. Basically, there's a big old antenna on top of the aircraft there, which I'm just showing through the window. and you can actually use that to navigate the aircraft using the radio equipment in the plane. A little bit old school. Okay, so I'm not going to go through radio navigation in this video, but you do have a control panel up here that controls the radio equipment and things like that. You've got a squawk code that you can use for online play as well, and then last page is just credits and additional info, where you can view the full-on PDF manual as well if you want to. But let's just get this thing going, because I think we've spent enough time on the ground now, and I probably should have closed that window beforehand, so you probably could have heard me a little bit easier that way. But anyway, it is what it is. So you can see here just outside the aircraft, everything's looking good. Got no weird flames or sparks or fire or anything, smoke coming off the engines, which is good, what we want. I must say, it really does look like a baby B-17 from the outside. It's almost got a twinkle of the B-17 in its eye, as it were. Okay, so let's go ahead and remove the wheel chocks now. We're good to go. Watch as Jack, our mechanic, makes light work of that. He managed to do that fairly quick. Go ahead and just, we've got our parking brake on, so just make sure that I'm on the brakes here. So just go down here, make sure my rudder pedals are working. We're only about 25 minutes in, folks, and we're only just getting moving. But yeah, you can see there's quite a lot to cover with this aircraft, so really is a bit of a joy to move forward there. I thought I was on the brakes, but yeah, the simulation didn't think so. So what I'm doing there is I'm just going to push on the rudder pedals and use a little bit of braking on the right hand wheel just to get some differential braking there. I'm just going to swing this thing around to the right hand side. What I will do as well is once we land, I'll see if I can't take one of the engine cowlings off and just show you guys under the hood, as it were. You'll get to see the engine, or one of the engines at least, and all its glory and all the detail that they've put into it. But yes, one thing I've noticed with this airplane, and probably some of the other airplanes in Microsoft Flight Sim, is that they seem to taxi quite easily, which is kind of the exact opposite of what I experienced in Flight Simulator X with some of those aircraft. So that's interesting. But anyway, so yeah, you really got to keep on the brakes with this aircraft, especially if you're even just a little bit above idle on the throttle. You have to be really careful, otherwise it will run away from you. Okay, let's go ahead and just stop here for a sec. I'm just going to request some permission from the tower, and can't do that because I haven't even turned on the radios. So let's just turn the radios on. Good thing I put those fuses back as well before, otherwise this probably wouldn't work either. Okay, so we'll just go ahead and depart, announce depart straight out. Might as well go ahead and turn on all of our nav lights, cabin lights, strobe lights, compass lights. Put some load on this electrical system. We'll be running the engine up anyway in just a moment, so the generator will take care of any load. You can see the dome lights are on now, even though we've got no passengers in the back. It's worth noting the washroom door, the toilet door, actually opens and closes too, and I've heard that there is a fully operational toilet, or fully modeled toilet, back there as well. So for those of you who do need to go, hopefully you won't need to go on this flight, because I can't make any guarantees as to how smooth this flight will be. Just kidding. Okay, everything looks good. So we've announced our depart straight out. So we'll just go ahead, do a final check, just make sure all of our nav lights are fully bright, compass lights, whatnot. One thing also to do is just to align our gyro with our actual compass. So I'll try and do that as accurately as I can here, just real quick. It's not the resolution on this directional gyro, which I'm just adjusting here, is, I think you kind of just have to click and drag the knob there to get a more finer tune on it. That's more or less correct, I guess. Okay, so we'll be heading out over to the right here, and then we'll be moving in a southerly direction after that. So I'll bring up the flight plan in just a moment. What I want to do first is obviously just pull up onto the runway. I don't have any AI traffic enabled, so I don't have to worry about other planes coming in to land or anything like that. We have announced our takeoff anyway, or announcing our impending takeoff. Hopefully we manage to take off, and hopefully we don't crash. Okay, so a few things to note. This thing will actually take off anywhere between 50 to 80 miles an hour, because it's got a very large wing area, as you probably saw. There are no flaps, So very primitive in that point of view, which is interesting. What I'm going to do here is just quickly bring up the clipboard and just have a look at the takeoff power setting. That's 36 inches and 2200 RPM. And then we've got a climb setting of 32 inches and 2100. Cruise between 27 and 29 and 2000. So the engine maximum RPM is only around 2200 RPM for maximum power. So just keep that in mind when you're flying this plane. Here is our manifold pressure gauge I'm just looking at there with the red and white bands. Don't want to go into the red band there. We are fairly unloaded today, so this thing will take off quite easily. You can see there we probably don't need too much power at all to get this thing moving. And before you know it, we'll be up to about 80 miles an hour. Just past about 50. And you can see the tails already started to come up there, so just be I'm just trying to do a few things at once here, trying to fly and give you guys a nice little camera angle. So yeah, my flying quality is going to suck a little bit, unfortunately. Just past 80 miles an hour, and then we're up in the air already. And yeah, I don't even have proper takeoff power applied right now. This thing will just lift itself off the ground. Gear up. Undercarriage indication is showing up. Very good. The gear actually doesn't take too long to raise. It does take a little bit longer to drop though, it seems. Okay, so up into the blue yonder we go, or blue and grey yonder more or less. We'll be heading off over to the left hand side. Looks like there's got a little bit of rain there today, even a little bit of precipitation. Just going to bring up the VFR map here because we don't have a GPS installed in the airplane, unfortunately, so we'll just have to use our on-screen GPS here, for better or worse. We'll be flying in the southeasterly direction and then hooking around to our destination airport. And you can see there that we'll be turning in a southerly direction. Well, we're in the process of turning now. Just going to minimize this window a little bit, bring it up to the left-hand corner. Turn on the GPS tracking, and probably just leave that there for the majority of the flight. So everything is going well and truly quite well at the moment. So engines haven't caught fire or anything like that. We can see that we're heading out into some fairly ominous weather though. So we might end up going through a few clouds there. It's going to be a little bit of a hairy situation, but hopefully not too bad. Just checking my oil temps, oil pressures all within range there. Fuel pressures all looking very happy. So all good. This is definitely an airplane which you need to keep an eye on as you're flying. Manifold pressures looking good, speed, climb, all good. So you really cannot afford to relax with this airplane when you fly it. I'm going to try and keep it around 4,000 feet today, probably 4 to 6,000 if I can help it. Don't want to get too high because then it's a real pain trying to come down at short order. This is a very short hop flight, so before you know it, we'll be at the destination airport. You can see they're doing about 23.5, or about 2300 RPM. Just going to bring the RPMs back a little bit to around 2000 there. There's no need to rev the engine so hard. These are very old school Pratt & Whitney radial engines, so no point in giving them too much juice, and you really want to preserve them and not abuse them, okay? Because this simulation model will actually track wear and tear more or less from flight to flight. If you really cook the engine though, it will replace the engine for you in the next flight. PDF manual will explain more about this as well. Let's just go into some outside views here and enjoy the cinematics a little bit. Coming into some cloud now, but I'm not sure if we'll actually hit any rain. We'll have to just see how we go. I'm going to bring up the GPS here and just see what the course is looking like. I think we're more or less on track. Always quite an interesting experience flying IFR because that's really all you've got when there's a cloud blocking your view. And we're breaking through the clouds, so that's good. We've broken through the clouds there, and we are getting closer to 2S9. We are not too far away now. We'll have to start descending shortly, actually. Oil pressures, oil temps looking good. Just going to go ahead and close up these oil shutters because the oil temps are a little bit low, and low oil temperature means thick oil, which means higher oil pressure, which is bad news all around. We want the oil temps closer to around 100 degrees Celsius, but not quite 100. We're around 50 odd there. And we've just passed 6,000 feet as well, so I think it's time to throttle back because we've still got quite a bit of power on. So let's bring the manifold pressure back and start our descent. This airplane really likes to climb, especially when it's empty, and any decent amount of power setting will see you soaring high above the clouds in no time, more or less. So something to keep in mind there. Got some lovely cloud cover out here today, and I say lovely because we can currently see, but not so good when you can't see. You can really see the large wing area that this aircraft affords, and you can see how even without any flaps, this thing can take off and land at a very, very slow speed. As I said before, from around 45 to 50 miles an hour onwards, it will start to exhibit lift. So that's thanks to these very chunky wings. Those old Pratt & Whitney radials just purring away there. No flames, no sparks. Just how we like it. Hitting a little bit of turbulence there. Can see some buffeting on the aircraft. And I think it's more or less time to start the descent now, because we'll have to do a bit of a loop to come in for final. So might as well just announce position actually.
Kilo Hotel Quebec Mike traffic November Charlie 1 tree 611 tree miles south 5,800 feet inbound to land runway 24.
Just wanted to show this engine temperature gauge selector in a bit more detail here. What you've got is cylinders 1, 4 and carburetor in order there, and then you've got carburetor, cylinder 4 and cylinder 1 for the right hand side. So what you can do is you can set for the cylinders or the carburetor just to show your temperature. 400 degrees Fahrenheit is about the maximum that you want for the engine, no more than that, and for the carburetor around 100 degrees Fahrenheit as well. And obviously I'm trying to fly the plane at the same time and having a bit of trouble there, so just ignore the slight banking, or rather major banking that's happening. So I've got it set on carburetor and I can see the carburetor temps are quite low. They should be about around 100 degrees Fahrenheit. So let's just bring these carburetor heat levers up, or carb heat levers up. Just introduce some heat into the intake manifold there. And you can see it's close to about 100 degrees Fahrenheit. There's where you want it to avoid icing. And we can see there cylinders 1 and 4 on the left are looking pretty good. I normally leave it on the hottest cylinder setting there. There's several settings in the middle of that selector that don't really do much. And you can see there that I've just passed 7,000 feet in amongst all of this as well. So let's just go ahead and pull the throttles right back, and oh boy, you can hear that the alarms are going off. So yes, everything is about to go down, so look out everyone. I'm just kidding, of course. I'm just operating the throttles like that rhythmically to simulate some sort of alarm condition, which in theory or in reality doesn't really exist. All that alarm is telling us is basically that the landing gear is still up, and serves as a bit of a reminder actually to let you know that the gear's up if you pull the throttles all the way back. You can see here really managed to get quite high before. I'm doing in excess of 150 miles an hour as we come down, descend with the throttles basically against the stop in the minimum position almost. Have to watch the speed to make sure you don't exceed around 200 miles an hour on the descent. This thing is rated to about 200 miles an hour top speed, so I would imagine that you wouldn't want to go much faster than that. The thing with these constant speed propellers as well, I find that as you pass a certain speed, you actually pass the varying pitchability of the propeller blades there, and the engines speed up, and if you're not careful they could actually speed up to a excessive speed. So just keep an eye out on your RPMs as you are descending, particularly when you start passing through the 150 mile an hour range. We are closing in on 2,000 feet now. Going to start to turn to the right. I've gone beyond my flight path a little bit here because we were a little bit too high there. We've left the descent for a little bit too late. So I'm just making sure that I've got enough of a distance coming into final to descend that final amount of altitude before we come in to the runway. So quite a bit of energy to bleed off still, unfortunately, and you can see that altimeter just deceptively increasing even as we bank here. These large wings really provide a huge amount of lift indeed, so something to really be aware of as you're flying this aircraft is that I actually did manage to take off on one engine and land and fly without much issue on one engine as well. So there's the airfield ahead of us there. You can see the little flashing light. I'm not doing the alarm there on purpose anymore. I am actually just trying to reduce the speed and altitude. So I think it's going to be a rather close call. Still around 2,500 feet, and the runway is looming ahead of us quite soon. So really just I've got one of the throttles completely bottomed out to the minimum. And I will be dropping the gear soon, but we're going just a little bit too fast, so we're not doing too badly actually. We can probably drop the gear shortly. Just don't want to be above that 100-mile-an-hour range. Okay, we are more or less on top of the airfield almost. We've really sped up now because I've really been trying to drain out this energy. And we're doing almost 150 miles an hour, so yeah, I think this one's going to be a close one. I'm really desperately just trying to get the speed back right now, so I've got the throttles more or less at minimum. Coming down, about 120, 130 miles an hour still. I really don't want to drop the gear right now. Just going to bring the RPMs back on the engines for what that's worth. And I'm just going to have to go for the gear, unfortunately. We're still doing above 110 miles an hour, but it is what it is. You can hear the buffeting from the gear. What I probably should have done is drop the gear earlier when I was going a bit slower just before. Probably would have put some extra drag on the plane. But looks like we're coming in just nice. Probably slightly too fast for my liking. So aim to come in at around 80 to 90 miles an hour. Add some power now, because it's starting to sink a little bit. Coming a little bit too far to the right there. Bring it over, add some rudder. Not quite the perfect center line there, but we've touched down just now. Now the simulation for touching down I think probably could be improved a little bit. There's no real tire skidding noise or anything like that. No idea what the real aircraft was like. But I get the feeling that there probably should be a little bit more tarmac and bitumen noise as you roll down the runway. So maybe that's something that they will be improving in a future update. We can only hope. But the rest of the aircraft is done exceedingly well from a simulation point of view, as you can see, and as you've seen so far. Really cannot fault this aircraft, apart from probably a missing sound effect on the right-hand flywheel when you start the engine. But aside from that, just watching the oil temps there, they are creeping up, so let's just go ahead and open these oil shutters real quick. Once I round this corner, actually, I'm just going to put the brakes on. Just wanted to clear the runway. Let's just put the brakes on here and stop things for a sec, because this oil temperature will creep up when you're on the ground, because there's not much airflow over the engines, and these engines are only air cooled. There's no radiator or anything like that, so they rely on a constant stream of airflow to cool them down. And obviously on the ground, when you're moving around, the oil temps will just start to shoot up because you're normally moving quite slow. So as you can see there, once the oil pressure reaches around 60 and below, it's not good, because we're up around the 100 degree mark on the oil temps now. So just want to keep the oil temps in check there, definitely, while you're on the ground still, because hot oil is thin oil and thin oil is no good. The viscosity simulation is actually done quite well. You will note once you reach over 100 degrees on the oil that your pressure starts to drop. So at that point, if you can cut the engine and just turn it off, that's probably ideal to preserve the engine, because once you have low oil pressure, that will signify a downhill run for your engine. Just cut across the grass here a little bit and pull in. We'll unload the baggage and then I'll see if we can't take a cowling off this left-hand engine. Okay, that's it. I think we'll call it done here. Let's just apply the parking brake. Just wanted to show off quickly this friction lock simulation as well. You can see here that the mixture and throttle and propeller levers actually vibrate around. So by applying the friction locks for each of the levers, you can actually tighten up the levers to stop them from moving around so much while the engines are running. So you've got friction locks for the propeller, throttle and mixture levers there. And those are those yellow levers basically. So you can operate those to tighten up your control levers just so that they don't move around so much and vibrate and all that kind of stuff. So that's pretty cool that that's been simulated as well. Just going to go ahead and cut the mixture on the right hand engine. And you can see the right engine has stopped. Let's go ahead and cut the mix on the left hand engine. Not a bad engine stop simulation there, probably not the best, but does the job. One thing I forgot to mention earlier was the primer controls. They do really, well, they should really be returned back to off after you start the engine. One thing I want to quickly show is there are actually collision physics between them. So if you pull out the plunger, you can't actually move the engine selector because it collides with the plunger. So that's, yeah, never really seen that before. So that's the position for having the primer controls off. You can see here the engine temperature display. And you can see there's a bit of an Easter egg. Something when disconnected. Obviously someone couldn't read what the gauge said in real life, so they just went ahead and just typed that in there. It's only very, very fine details there. Don't really notice it unless you're looking. Turn off the magnetos and the fuel valves. Turn off all the light switches and whatnot to reduce the draw on the battery. And then turn off the battery switch last. All these switches and levers are persistent. So when you load the simulation the next time, all the levers and switches are in the position that you last left them, which is really, really cool. So just something to remember if you've left something in a strange position and then you're wondering why the plane's not starting up. It's probably because you've left something in the wrong position or you've done something. Okay, so let's go ahead and unload the baggage from the rear cargo area. We need to get this door open first, so let's just hop back inside. We'll just bring up the clipboard here and we'll go to the payload page where we can select the rear cargo door to be opened, and we'll also get the rear baggage cart as well. There we go. So Heinrich will go ahead and get the baggage cart for us. The door's been opened. There's the baggage cart. Now we just need to basically give the order to unload the baggage. So let's just hop back inside. And then up here you've got the minus button in the Mail Express baggage section. And then of course basically hit the Make It So button, the green button there. And then they'll start to basically, well, first they'll install the wheel chocks it seems, and then they'll go ahead. The mechanic's doing something with the oil and fuel filler there. Not sure what they're doing. I didn't touch the fuel settings, but anyway. And there's the luggage being unloaded, as you can see there, onto the trolley. So as you can see, it's quite a cool little simulation there of the loading, unloading of baggage and passengers and whatnot. There are no 3D models for the passengers themselves if you choose to load passengers. So that's a bit of a downer, but I think the frame rate hit is probably a little bit too much with the passengers being modeled there. What I just wanted to show as well is just in here, you do have the option, and I didn't show this before, to remove the cowling from the engine. So let's just go ahead and remove the cowling from the left-hand engine and basically expose the entire engine so that you can view it. And we can see that the Pratt & Whitney radial engine there is modeled to perfection, more or less. You can see the exhaust and intake collectors. You see the exhaust at the bottom, the intake at the top, the accessories on the back of the radial, the oil tank. It's all there, basically just missing a turbo system, I guess. There will be a supercharger mounted within the engine itself, as usual, as there is a supercharger mounted on these engines. But yes, very, very nicely modeled there. Now, one thing I want to show as well is just with this oil system, after every flight, it's a good idea to do a top up. And you can actually see here, if I go quickly and we can look at the oil tank, you can see there that the oil has slightly diminished as part of our flight. So you can actually adjust your oil levels from here. But what I like to do is just go to the oil page and just click on the top up. Select the oil grade, which is 30 in this case, and then what he'll do is he'll basically top up the oil, which won't take too long at all. You can see it's already done. What you can also do as well is you can do an oil change. Even though oil deterioration is not modeled in the simulation, you can just run the same oil forever, and there's no real penalty there. You can still do an oil change procedure if you want by clicking the oil change button, and this is useful if you wish to change grades of oil. So if you're traveling to a warmer or colder climate, you can go ahead and choose a different thickness of oil, and I've just selected the same thickness. So really there's no need to really do this right now, but just to demonstrate the oil pan and all that being placed under the engine and then draining the oil out of the engine and refilling it with the oil grade that you chose. So really, really cool. When you consider this plane's only about $20, the amount of simulation that you're getting for it, and you can see there is refilling the left engine with oil. The amount of simulation and detail that they put into this plane is basically equal to a $70, $80 plane. Yeah, you can see there it's also topping up the left oil tank. So the oil change itself will take a bit more time than just a simple top up, as you would expect. But you can see there that the tank is now completely full. And the right hand side, I'm not going to touch that. But yes, these things you do need to take care of after every flight. Ensure that you're you're basically taking care of the oil, because if you run out of oil, it's a bad day. And these engines do consume oil as you fly. So at the end of every flight, you'll notice your oil levels have come down a little bit. So definitely make sure that you keep tabs on the oil levels in your plane, and also the fuel levels, of course. But that's a given, isn't it? So that's the end of the video, everyone. Thank you so much for watching. If you've made it this far, I really appreciate your viewership and your patience. Please like, comment, subscribe if you enjoyed the video. If you haven't already subscribed, please share with your friends as well if you think it's something they might enjoy. And always welcome your feedback and comments in the comment section below. Please leave a comment if you would like to see anything in future that I can cover. Otherwise, I shall see you all in the next one.